Awesome.
Right, yay, hi. Hi, after that. Welcome, this is Kathryn Flay, and she is here tonight to talk to us a little bit, or sort of like answer some of our questions about the stuff interview that went up. It was yesterday, wasn't it? I haven't actually watched the whole interview, but it created such a stir all over New Zealand, actually, and you know, I've just seen all the questions flying all around the show, and it's really, I don't know, I don't find mainstream media to be a balanced source of media, so I always try and look for somebody else to have a conversation with as well. So we're starting with you, and I'd just love you to introduce yourself to everybody and just let them know a little bit about yourself and why you even have any, you know, validation to even speak on this topic tonight. So welcome, Kathryn.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalia. It's a real honour and privilege to be able to speak. I will start with a disclaimer. I'm just a mere human. I am a daughter, wife, sister, friend. I've got 4 sons. I own a business. I'm relatively busy, and I'm only human, and I'm probably pretty tired at the moment, but it was really nice to get your call. I have to confess I've not actually watched the documentary either, so I've got no idea what you're planning to ask, but what I can do is tell you my experience, and hopefully answer any questions. If I can't answer them, I will let you know. Just to let you know a little bit about me, so I have been a registered nurse in New Zealand for 25 years. I am graduate trained through several universities. I have postgrad qualifications in child and adolescent mental health, in women's health, in population health, in growth and development, and also in addiction. So that's kind of my background. I worked for about 20 years when I was training as a nurse in the 90s. We were really celebrating something called the United Nations Geneva Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I've always been really interested in children and giving children the best possible start in life. So for me, that was something that was really exciting because it felt like we had something to really grab onto to actually have better outcomes for children. As I've worked over the last 25 years, I've realised that there's this real movement towards the centralisation of services, which they called equity, and I think I mistakenly interpreted that term to mean equality. For me, my definition of what I would say is equity is that every single child and person in New Zealand has the best opportunity that they can have for the best life that they can have. I think I had a little bit of a difference of understanding of what that meant, and I think after many years of working, I really wanted to I was starting to become disheartened because I wasn't seeing any grassroots change for people. I was starting to see services that were run more on a bit of a tick box, bums on seats. I was seeing people trying to put, you know, as a square peg into a round hole. I have a little bit of an issue with labelling of people, particularly in my mental health background. I found it quite hard to stomach that we need to put a label of something like ADHD on a child so that they can have support through the school system, because that label actually stays with the child for life. And I also found it quite hard that working within a medical system where often, you know, many health practitioners know that the answer doesn't come in a pill or an injection. It's actually more of a whole lifestyle approach. And by that, I mean, yes, the physical part of the body, but also our emotional, our spiritual, our environmental health, what we eat, where we live, what our whānau and communities like around us, and that all builds together as health. And I began to get a bit disheartened within that service, and I really didn't want to get to the end of my career feeling like I'd been trying to make a real difference and I hadn't. And I thought, well, I've been doing it for 25 years. I'm going to jump ship and actually buy my own business, because that way I should have a bit more control as to the input you can have with people.
Yeah.
So I bought an early learning centre, and I've discovered pretty quickly there's just as much red tape in an early learning centre, if not more, to be quite honest.
Wow.
And as I've really investigated things within education, it's started showing up quite a few questionable things for me, things I can't find answers to. So that's really who I am. As far as what I like doing, I love being outside. I love being on the water. I'm a coastie by heart. I live in Orewa. My husband and I have been working on our house, pottering away for about 10 years, and it's still a building in process. We just love being out at the beach. I love dancing barefoot in the sun in front of live music. Call me a hippie at heart. I truly am. My favourite thing to do is just hang out with my family. It really is.
So, okay, so that's a pretty broad range of things. You're like sounds like a nurse, a truth seeker, and a hippie, and a mum, and all of these things all rolled into one. So what got you into, we're about to have a conversation about what people are calling a crazy conspiracy theorist, somebody who's, they're saying he's dangerous, he's a false prophet, a cult leader, and so you sound like a pretty reasonably balanced and, can I hazard a guess, quite a stable person. What would you be doing hanging around the likes of somebody like that?
Well, I'm just going to start off by saying what is stable, because we all have good days, we all have bad days, we all have days that we want to sit in the corner and cry, and we all have days that we want to jump from the rooftops and shout with joy. What is stable? It's always changing. Probably depends on who you talk to as to whether I'm very stable or not, because I've got quite high energy levels most of the time, and most people can't understand that. For me, during our first level 4 lockdown, we started getting some letters and information coming through from the Ministry of Health.
That's to your daycare, is it?
Oh, sorry, not Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education. My apologies. And one of the things that intrigued me at first was a piece of information that was sent to us, and we were asked to share it with all our connecting families as research. And when I read it, I actually realised it wasn't research. It was, in fact, an opinion piece, and it wasn't in line with the research that I'd been looking into. So when that first lockdown happened, I must admit, yes, I went and did my Gilmore's shop and got enough stuff to lock my family up for a year, just in case it was this post-apocalyptic movie that you see on TV.
Yep.
And I got really into making my own bread and planting all my veggies all of a sudden. And
wow, you were serious.
I was serious, because I absolutely know that we hear about superbugs. We hear that the power of antibiotics is fading against the superbugs, and I was really worried for my family. And so I did start looking into it a little bit, and it concerned me a wee bit, some of the information that was coming from the Ministry of Education. So I sort of thought, I need to look at this a bit more. So I just kept looking into things, and then I found that there were sort of inconsistencies with the information that was coming between that and the research I was seeing overseas happening. And I struggled a little bit that nobody really wanted to talk to me about it, whereas people both within Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health have always been happy to chat with me about things, but I got not a lot of response, and nobody really wanted to talk to me about it, and I struggled with that. So I really started investigating what was this virus and where has it come from. And then I think my ears really pricked up when we started using the PCR test in New Zealand, because in fact the leaflet on the PCR test says that it cannot test for coronavirus, cannot test for COVID.
Wow.
So I sort of thought, well, that's an interesting choice of test. And in fact, Dr. Kary Mullis, who designed that test and won a Nobel Prize for it, he himself had staunchly said we cannot use this test to detect viruses, and had often fought people who wanted to use it for that reason. And I thought it a little bit strange that he died in August 2019, and then all of a sudden his PCR test was being used to detect COVID-19. So I started doing a little bit more research, and I found out at that point that leading experts all over the world were agreeing that an isolate of the COVID-19 virus has never actually been able to be isolated. And to this day, it's not been isolated. And then I think, well, how can it be patented years ago as COVID-19 if it's not actually isolated yet? And there just started being lots of questions. And I thought, this is really strange. It just doesn't add up. So I'm a typical Class A personality. I like to know everything about everything. I don't like to talk about things unless I absolutely know what I'm talking about and understand it. I am quite blessed with a brain that I do manage to understand medical things quite easily. And I just kept getting more and more questions, and I thought to myself, am I the only person that's seeing that this doesn't all add up, and all the information that's coming from different places doesn't add up? So towards the end of July, I just happened to be scrolling through Facebook, and it's not something that I've done much of in my life, but with lockdowns, I think I started paying more attention to keeping in connection with friends across New Zealand and around the world, seeing how people were doing. And I just happened upon this guy called Billy Te Kahika. So I knew nothing of him, but it was a recording, and his voice started talking, and he just said the words, am I the only one that's seeing this? And it caught my attention. I thought, I'll listen for a little bit more. And as I heard him talking, I thought, you're talking about what I'm thinking. And that's really interesting. And then I started looking at some of the comments that were going up, and I thought, I'm not the only one that's seeing this. I should find out a little bit more about this guy. So that was just a week before the merger and launch of New Zealand Public Party with Advanced New Zealand at the Logan Campbell Centre. So I thought, I'm going to go down there. I'm just going to have a listen. I'm going to see what it's all about. I don't think I've been to a political rally in my life before, so it was quite a new experience for me. But I came away from there thinking, this guy actually knows even more than what I know. And whereas what I'd been looking at was really confined, I guess, within the health and the education sectors, I just thought, no, I need to find out even more. So I went to a meeting in about a week later, and I can't even remember where it was now. And I thought, yep, I'm going to go ask some questions. I'm going to find out. Jamie Lee Ross was the person that was speaking at that event. And at that point in time, I didn't particularly hold a high impression of him, but I can safely say that has gone up hugely in my respect levels since then. And I think I just didn't know about him. I was prepared to give him a go and listen to what he had to say.
Yeah. One
of the things that impressed me at that meeting is that he said, you know, look, we can actually agree to disagree on things. That's the beauty of democracy.
Yeah.
But it's about coming together, because it's actually those differences that make us stronger as we come together. And I thought, well, that makes sense. And so I was given permission to start up a local Fans of NZPP page. And I thought, I'll just see if there's anyone in my community that is sort of thinking along these lines. It'd be quite nice to compare notes and find some other like-minded people. So that's what I did, and actually that group grew really quickly, and it actually got to the point where, well, are we going to have a candidate for this area or not? And that was a tough one for me, because I'm actually quite a busy person. Many people say I haven't got the ability to say no, and that's just because deeply within me, I would do anything to help anybody. If I could help somebody to be in a better position than where they are now, then I would do that, because that makes me feel good as a person. I don't do it to feel good. It's just natural. If I can do something to help you, if I can share some information, if I can give you some food, if I can do something, I want to do that. And I really sat down and I thought, do you know, I don't like what I'm seeing in the country. There's too many questions that are not getting answers. There's too many things I'm concerned about with what I'm seeing in education happening in New Zealand. And I thought, I actually can't look my children in the eye and tell them that I didn't try to raise awareness that something's not right, something's not going on. So for me, I became really worried about the world that my children are growing into. And I just thought, I have to do something. So right, at the 11th hour, I put my hand up and I said, yes, I'll be a candidate.
So you said that you hadn't been involved in politics at all before this, and you'd never been to a political rally or anything like that. So who's to say that this party that you decided to be a candidate for was the right one if you hadn't looked into any of the other parties? Like what made you choose, you know, I mean, apart from what is obvious, what you've just talked about, that you felt like you aligned with him, is there a possibility you might have missed it with another party?
Oh, it's always a possibility, but the further I've gone down the track, no, I don't think I have missed that at all. I've certainly worked within political spheres without really realizing that I had. So within health and within education, I've always looked at the policies that they've put out. I've looked at the promises they've made. I've looked at the strategies that have been put forward, and I've looked at them and I've gone, okay, how do we take that from a policy to actually making a difference for my neighbour next door and for the children that come in and see me? How do I take that policy and make it work for people? So I've looked a lot at different political policies, but it had always been within health and education because they're my passions. So I think when I started looking at what Advance New Zealand was all about, I hadn't realised that there was a far bigger picture than just the stuff I was seeing. So I went through probably a period of a lot of research, because I was thinking, surely this can't be right. I was looking for some proof to prove me wrong, because I didn't really like what I was hearing, and I really wanted to be proved wrong so I could just go back to my normal life. But unfortunately for me, I couldn't switch off with it. When I started realizing, oh, there's that whole side of it as well, and there's another whole side of it, then I started having to do research there, and oh, that does make sense. And what is this sovereignty issue? It's not a term that I would have ever used before, but when you're faced with you know, the prospect of potentially a forced vaccination, and for me as a nurse, knowing that a vaccination that's been created within 6 years would still be classed as a rushed vaccine and not tested properly, and they're saying, hey, we can have a vaccine maybe next year, and I'm going, hang on a minute, you haven't even isolated the virus yet, so how can you even be working on a vaccine? There just became so many angles that I started looking at the way the economy works. I've never been an economist, but I know how to run a business. I started looking at things and I thought, well, those are odd decisions to be making, and that's an odd place to be sending money when at the moment it's really obvious the money's needed somewhere else. If we're actually talking about what's best for average Kiwi, let's face it, 99% of us are just the average Kiwi. There's not that many millionaires and billionaires in our country. And if you're talking about what's best, and my heart and my passion have always been for those children that have nothing. We talk about this philosophy of we need to give people a hand up, not a hand out. And I start seeing, you know, handouts. And for me as an employer, it was quite difficult, the wage subsidy that came, because yes, it held us through a little bit of time, but the implications of what they've required businesses to do mean that a lot of businesses will go bankrupt. And that's exactly what we've seen. We've seen businesses closing, we see shops that are empty, and I'm kind of going, wouldn't it have made more sense to actually let the businesses find a way to keep all of their employees rather than getting a benefit, and when it's cut off they all become unemployed at that point in time? And I'm just thinking that's not very wise management of money. So I started looking at economy. I started looking at the COVID response bill and actually comparing what are these people saying when they're saying our rights are being taken away, because I live a pretty good life. If I want to go out, I go out. I've got 4 children, so I don't go out very often, but I just thought, this is, if you want to actually get this country back running, if you want to get the economy going, if you want to stop the child poverty rates here in New Zealand, we're actually kind of doing it exactly wrong. And then I was introduced to the United Nations and World Economic Forum event that happened at the end of 2019, where our Prime Minister stood up and offered New Zealand as saying that she would commit us to be the first country in the world to fully comply with the Agenda 21 and 2030, what needed to be done. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I don't remember you asking me about that. And I don't know much about these agendas, so I'm going to look them up. And when I looked them up, I thought, well, that's really interesting. As I read those, it actually talks about controlling people. It talks about a system that needs to know everything about everything. And that's what I've been working with for 25 years, centralizing everything so we can make it all fair and equitable. But in reality, that's not what's happened. The gaps between the rich and the poor have only got bigger in that 25 years. So if as a country we're signing up to something that is saying they will have complete control over everything, how are they going to make sure that it's actually equitable? And it just, there were things that didn't add up. So I started looking at what negotiation has there been, what consultation with the people of New Zealand, and that's when I've realised there has been none. For me, I'm really passionate about our country's heritage, and I'm just seeing huge discrepancies, and I'm going, is it even right that you can do that without asking the people of New Zealand, without asking people that have signed us to those original treaties that are between the people of New Zealand and the Crown? That's got nothing to do with government. So how can our government give our country away? Why are we selling off large portions of our land for next to nothing when our country is going into poverty? We could actually use getting a fair price for that. And who are those buyers that are getting it? Why is it not being offered to New Zealanders?
Can I just throw a little comment in there, because I just heard yesterday that our government has just sold 50% of shares of a farming corporate called, is it Silverfield or something like that?
Silverfern.
Silverfern.
Yeah, so that actually happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah,
51%
shares of Silverfern. And it's actually interesting if people want to go and have a look on the New Zealand Beef and Lamb and Federated Farmers websites at their newsletters. It's really interesting, the latest newsletter that they've put out, which just is talking about the new waterways laws, the new farming laws and restrictions. And it basically is meaning that for a lot of people, farming is no longer a viable, sustainable option. And what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from people is they have no option to sell their farms, but they're not actually being sold to New Zealanders. And it concerns me, how much land do New Zealanders actually own at the end of the day?
Silverfern was the 50% that was sold to China.
Yep.
So they own, is it just China, or is it more countries that are coming in and buying up the land?
Oh, I have no doubt that there is other countries, but I would definitely say that China is the bulk of it. I just heard something yesterday. I haven't looked into it, but an absolutely huge planted forest that is near harvest time. I don't even want to really hazard, but hundreds of hectares of land in pine forestry has all just been sold to China. For nowhere near the value that would have come to New Zealand if we'd actually harvested it ourselves and let that profit come back within New Zealand. The Chinese most wealthy man there, multi-billionaire, has made his fortune selling New Zealand bottled water, and we don't sell the water in New Zealand. We sell the rights to the bottling of the water. I believe he pays $4,000 per year for it, and he's made billions. Now, why can't that money stay within New Zealand? I think we've got so much money that we can tie up on this beautiful saying that we hear all the time, which is the innovation of technology for commercialization. A lot of money goes through that. That means we can have some more reviews. We can come up with some more documents about how we should do things. But what it actually means is we can't employ more people. We can't actually employ teachers. We can't employ nurses. We can just come up with some more systems. And it really angers me, because actually, why don't we put that money into actually building a bottling plant here in New Zealand, bottle our own water, and keep the money and the profit for that ourselves? We certainly know we could use an injection of billions of dollars into our economy at the moment. So why are we just giving it away?
So that's land, and that's economy, right? So we've talked about that, and we've talked about some of the health stuff. And then apparently on 7 Sharp tonight, there was they threw in a piece about how they've just they've just signed up a deal to bring in, interfacing, something to do with
facial recognition.
Facial recognition, that's it. So they've just signed some mega deal where we're actually all going to have that facial recognition happening soon. So we've talked about just briefly about sort of our land and farming and economy, and some of our health stuff, and now we've got this facial recognition thing, and all of these things, just in my mind, all of these things are like, those are conspiracy theories. That's never going to happen. The facial recognition especially. And now we're just having this conversation. It's a normal conversation, and you're a normal person as far as I know.
We've got off topic from what we were going to talk about already, but hey, I'm good at that.
But I'm just trying to bring it all back, because actually, you're talking about policies and things that the party that you've aligned to are fighting for, right? You're talking about the things you're fighting for, and they all sound very normal to me. So how is it that that this interview has been able to tar and feather this one person as a conspiracy theorist? Do you think you're following a messiah, a cult leader? Because, the things that we've just briefly talked about don't sound cultish. They sound like policy that's being put in place.
There may well be people out there that are following for that reason. I don't know any myself. What happened for me is that for a long time, I've been realizing that what I'm doing is not making a difference for enough people on a big enough scale. And for me, the penny only just started to drop when I started doing a little bit of research, and I started actually questioning how the government was doing things, because I've kind of realized you can't change anything within a ministry. It's a dead end, but I never knew why. And as I have spoken with like-minded people that have known things I haven't known, I've been able to take that away and research it a bit. A lot of it for me does come back to the United Nations Agenda 21 and 2030, because for me, that's what made me go, the penny drops. Now I get it. Now I understand why you can't get anywhere. For me, it's not so much about following Billy. He was the person that actually stood up and first said, this doesn't make sense. But for me, I need to do my own homework. I don't actually follow anybody. I absolutely, madly, blindly love my husband. I know he's got my back, and that's awesome for me. But I don't give that to anybody else. I am very much someone that likes to sit back and listen, and I'll have a think about things. My whole life, people have called me the devil's advocate, because even if I'm not necessarily agreeing with what I say, I like to find out if people have really thought about their beliefs and what's led them to believe that so avidly. So even if I agree with them, I like to throw out the other angle. And, people for many years have said, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, no, I just want to know how you know what you say you know. I actually agree with you and I know it's to be true, but do you know why it's true? And, I've kind of settled in that role for many years. But, there's this saying that says, what's the definition of insanity? And that's doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's what I felt like we were starting to do as a country, the same thing over and over again, and yet things weren't changing. So for me, I listened to Billy and I thought, man, this guy's thought about some stuff I haven't thought about, so I'm going to go away and research it. I'm quite highly trained in research and in various methodologies. And I went away. I know how to work out whether, whether the research has come from a credible source. I know how to work out. I look behind the scenes. I look at who's funded that research to take place. I look at who's involved and connected with it. I look at the outcome. I look at lots of things. I know how to work out whether it's any good or basically it's just somebody's opinion that they've created a way to verify. And so I started looking up a lot of what he was saying and I thought, this guy's done his homework. He knows quite a bit. I started connecting with other experts right across New Zealand that I've had throughout my career, and also with some other experts around the world seeking their opinion. And I thought, this makes sense. But what I couldn't make sense of is, why is that not the same as what our government's saying at the moment? And I really couldn't understand that. And I also couldn't understand why nobody was willing to talk to me about it. One of the things I found really interesting about that documentary, and I haven't read it, I haven't listened to it, I've read a little bit of the writing of it just at the beginning. And one of the comments from that particular reporter is that nobody wanted to talk to her about Billy. And I thought, well, that's funny. I'm a candidate. You didn't try and get in touch with me. I would have talked to you. I don't follow Billy. I respect him as being the person that put his hand up and said, hey, this is not right. I respect him in that we went, I wasn't part at that time, but they went through a democratic process of saying who should lead it, who should spearhead it. And, the people decided, Billy, you're the one that should do it. Billy didn't want to do it. I understand that because, he's the same as me. He just quite likes to hang at home with his family and have some downtime.
Wonder if he feels like he wishes he'd never put his hand up.
Many times. And, my heart just breaks for his wife and his children who see the things that are being said about them. They know it's not true. But how hard
so let's just stop that. Let's just stop there and say, let's rewind back to that. His family are seeing all this stuff and they know it's not true. They know it's not true. So what's not true? The question or the things that, Billy was accused of in this, what do they even call that? Was that an opinion piece video? I don't know.
They're calling it a documentary.
Oh, documentary. Okay. Yeah. The things that I've read and seen today that they've called him were, conspiracy theorists, which we've covered. False prophet. What does that even mean?
Can I come back to conspiracy theorist? Because we are still being labelled as conspiracy theorists. And I'm thinking, now, we were given that label because we were saying lockdowns won't work. because that's what the world leading experts were saying. That's how we got that title. And even just yesterday in the New Zealand Herald and on one of the main Australian newspapers, they were reporting on the World Health Organization complete backflip. So Dr. David Nabarro from the World Health Organization is pleading with governments and world leaders to stop lockdowns. They have said that world poverty has doubled since lockdowns began. They've said that world child malnutrition has at least doubled, and more likely more than that. The only thing that has been achieved because of the lockdowns is increasing poverty for people. They are pleading stop lockdowns. Now that's a really big announcement to come from the World Health Organization. I haven't seen that on any of our news channels yet at all.
Did we take, because I don't have a TV and I have not watched the news or anything for like 7 years, so I see what I need to see and what comes up online. But I did know about the WHO. Was the New Zealand government was actually following the WHO's lead, weren't they? So
they were back in March.
Yeah.
But it was as early as April they started deviating against what the World Health Organization was saying.
Yeah.
And they just haven't updated since then our plan.
Yeah.
And actually it's quite interesting. There might be some people that have heard of the Great Barrington Declaration. So this is a declaration that's come out from, who was it? Basically the German coronavirus investigation, which was a group of leading professionals that were investigating coronavirus. What has resulted is they've put together one of the leading experts on that has put together this Great Barrington declaration for people. Now that has been signed by hundreds of world leading epidemiologists, sociologists, virologists, economists, all sorts of people. It's got hundreds of thousands of signatures on it, and what they are saying is that what has happened here and what the government has done is one of the greatest crimes against humanity. Actually, no, they're saying it is the greatest crime against humanity that has ever happened. So if we look back to, we've had a couple of wars in the last century, they're saying it's bigger than that. We have got world leading lawyers that are used to, so one in particular did the original class action against the Deutsche Bank that used to be quite a well-respected bank and is now well known to be a criminal haven of activity. What they're saying is that they are actually going to use information that first came out from the Nuremberg trials after World War II, which at the moment is what they call Section 7 of... what do they call it? Section 7 of the international, oh God, don't quote me on that one. It's coming shortly, but it stemmed out of the Nuremberg trials. And what they're saying is that the World Health Organization have knowingly led all of this destruction and devastation through the world for not putting stronger emphasis on the fact that countries should not be locked down. They've allowed countries to go on knowing that we'll have things like social distancing, mask wearing, vaccinations, various things to happen, and they've done that knowingly that it's actually the wrong move to be making. So it will be the largest class action ever across the globe, and there are so many leading international specialists and experts that are saying it, and I'm going, why are we not seeing this on our news? This is major. We have got countries like Spain, where just today their main city of Madrid came to complete standstill because anti-lockdown protesters want the government, or the whole government, to resign over their handling of the COVID scandal, they're calling it. We've got major cities across the world coming to stand down with hundreds of thousands and millions of people saying this is not right. You're not following the scientists. You're not following the evidence. And yet we're not hearing about it in New Zealand. That just, to me, seems wrong.
So I just read today
about a false prophet.
Yeah.
And Billy's never called himself a prophet. He's only ever called himself a human. I choose to follow his lead because he's actually a really humble man. He's open to what I talk about. He's open to debate with me. And he's actually a brilliant mind that can hold a really good debate, and he can point to the evidence. And I really respect that in a person. And I've not come across another politician that is actually willing to look at the evidence with me. So I have met a number of politicians from other parties. They haven't got a clue what they're talking about. And I kind of wonder, have they done their research, or are they being told what to say?
Yeah. So I'm just going to cut backwards and forwards in between things, otherwise we're going to lose track here. But I wanted to ask a couple of things. So other politicians. So I've heard Billy say in different things online that he's the reluctant politician, or he's not a politician, and maybe that's why he's more humble, like how you said, more willing to sit down and have a talk with people. But there were apparently 12, 15 other candidates, was it, who apparently left the what is the Advanced New Zealand?
So yes, I've heard that rumour. I would love to know who they are, because I've actually been there right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So yes, a couple of people I can't talk about because of legal action that stands, because of what they've done within the party, which is a definite plan to undermine and overthrow our leadership right from the very beginning. And yes, we have had people who have publicised and done things that have been based on pure blatant lies. And I've seen that with my own eyes, and I've heard it with my own ears. I can think of 3 people who are no longer in our party because of that. We have got one candidate who is actually a fantastic lady with amazing knowledge, and the reason that she's no longer a candidate is purely because we didn't check the paperwork close enough, and when it went through the Electoral Commission, it was actually found that there was one piece she hadn't signed on one dotted line, and for that reason she was unable to become a candidate.
Well, now that's an interesting point as well, because in that interview I did watch about 10 minutes of it, and I saw a bit where he said, where Billy said on his CV there was something to do with a time frame that he was in, was it the army or the police? And he said, well, that was a typo, because I've never actually said that I was in there for a really long time. I've always said I was in there for a short amount of time. But that journalist, the lady, whoever she is, she said, you don't make mistakes like that. People don't, she basically just said, did you not proofread your work? And now you're just saying that somebody's very important electoral doctorate or doctorate, whatever you call it, information wasn't checked properly. So there is room for human error in human beings.
Realistically, as a party, I think we're about 16 weeks old now. I have never learnt so much in 16 weeks. I have never had so many pieces of research, so many bits of paper, so many of my notes, so many people. I literally get hundreds and hundreds of emails and texts and messages every day, so many that I can't keep up with, and so many that I know that there will be people out there I have not responded to yet. If anybody's listening, I'm really sorry. I can't wait to get round to responding to everybody. But the reality is we've been so busy all the way through. I can completely understand how that happened. And one of the things that I've been dealing with is the hard drive in my computer's died. So I've had to start with a whole new computer and all new systems and load up again. So trying to learn those technical systems at the same time I'm trying to work 100 miles an hour. Yeah, there is room for human error, and you know, that's gutting, but she's an amazing lady. She's still in full support of what we're doing. We have a candidate who, just because of the backlash with Advanced New Zealand, he couldn't allow that to go on for his business in terms of actually providing food to put on his table. And he chose to step down, but he's still in 100% support of us. We still chat.
So the numbers aren't anywhere near 12 or 15, like they're saying that 12 or 15 candidates have stepped down and said that there's some horror.
Well, I can think of 3 that have stepped down. That needed to step down because their heart was not in the right place. They were not team players, and they were, you know, realistically, there's no room for ego. We need to work together as a team. It doesn't matter what place anyone comes within the team, because we're all here to put the best of our brains and the best of our araha and love and just help and support a better lifestyle for all New Zealanders, because we live in an amazing country. There's no reason that we need to have poverty in New Zealand. There's no reason we have to have you know, massive waiting lists for medical services. And we just want to put our brains together and raise the standard of living here and get us through this economic crisis, get us through this health crisis. And we're working together as a team, and it has become really apparent that there are a few people that have got that had their own agenda for what they wanted to do. And it wasn't, you know, for us, it's really important that it's democratic. I've got some great ideas, but I don't necessarily think that my ideas are the most amazing ideas in the world, because you're continually learning new things. You have to be open to learning new things. And we did have a few people that really decided that they had already worked out all the answers, they knew how to do it, and they weren't prepared to listen to anybody else, and they weren't prepared to work with anybody else. And as far as the team goes, you can't work like that as a team. So yes, I can think of 3 people. I can think of 1 person that didn't get through purely because of paperwork. And I can think of 1 person who stood down purely because they needed to make sure they could still put food on their table. So that gives me a grand total of 5. I'm not sure who all the other ones are. I've been there since the beginning. So whether they actually weren't candidates in the first place, I know a lot of people applied to be candidates, but obviously you do need to make sure that people have got their heart in the right place, that they can actually assess knowledge and give input to it. It's not about educational training. It's not about fixed beliefs. It's actually just about wanting the best and putting the heart and soul into the best. So maybe there's people that actually were never candidates. They just hoped they were going to be candidates. I'm not sure.
Could they be some?
But I don't know where 14 comes from.
Yeah. Could they be some of the same people who, because another thing that I've heard, and I'm trying to refer back to as much of this conspiracy and this, you know, this stuff about Billy as possible, because, you know, that's what we want to get to. So could some of these people be the ones who have said that Billy's a narcissist, that he's got a huge ego, that he is completely self-absorbed, doesn't listen to anybody in his party, doesn't, you know, it's his way or the highway. These are just a few of the things that I've heard about his ego. So how can you speak to that?
For all I know, yes, they could be. I really wouldn't have a clue who's saying that, and I wouldn't have a clue on what grounds they're saying that. And unless I actually spoke to those people, I wouldn't know. They could potentially be, but they might not be. In terms of working with Billy, every time I've tried to get hold of him, if he hasn't answered his phone, he's rung back fairly quickly. And you know, there's times you can't answer a phone. I get that. He's listened to what I've had to say. When we have decisions to make within our caucus, we've got 61 candidates. We take democratic votes. Who agrees? Who doesn't agree? What else do we need to talk about? I think we've come to complete agreement on everything. And that's not that we agree about everything. That's that we agree that this is the best way forward for the party. I've not seen a narcissistic trait in Billy at all, and I well know a lot about narcissistic personalities. I wouldn't have a clue where that comment comes from. I'd love to see where that comes from.
Okay.
I had an interesting day one day just here on the streets of Orewa, and I was wearing my Advanced New Zealand t-shirt, and I had a lady come running up to me yelling out, "Oh, your boss owes my family money and he's done dodgy deals," and she was yelling at the top of her voice. And I just said to her, "Look, I would love to be able to grab your details, because I know Billy would love to be able to sort it out. His heart is if somebody feels they have been wronged, he'd like to talk to them. He'd like to find out why." But as of yet, those people aren't actually giving us a way to talk to them or to help them to meet with Billy. They seem to be more interested in making noise than about sorting anything out. So yeah, I don't know where the narcissism comes, the ego. Look, Billy will be the first person to say, "What do you think? What are people telling you?" It's not about what I'm thinking, it's about us representing the people. So, you know, what are they saying to you in your area? Now that's not ego. He wants to represent what the people are saying. He's got ideas, I've got ideas. All of our candidates have ideas, but our one voice is no more important than any other person's one voice. It actually, as a country, it's about all of us. You know, what does that individual person think? What do the people in that community think? I can't pretend to know what people in a whole community think if I don't live there and I don't talk to those people. And Billy's very the same. I very rarely hear him talk about what he thinks should happen. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard him talk within our caucus about what he thinks should be happening. He wants to hear from us. And to me, that's a true leader, someone that's actually working alongside us and being a team member, not somebody that's sitting up the top telling us what to do. And I think that's why we're all just working so hard within our own electorates and what we're doing, because, you know, he's saying it's your guys' voice. It's the voice from your communities. It's not about me. And I would actually say he's a very humble man, not an ego man.
That's interesting. And you spend how often do you think you spend? You know, what sort of time frame do you spend with him on a weekly basis?
Oh, look, this last few weeks has been a bit different because all of our timetables are quite hectic. But certainly from midway through August up until October, we would have had our caucus team meetings 3 to 4 times a night on 3 to 4 times a week.
Oh, wow.
On Zoom. And now we would always have averaged about 50 to 55 of our candidates on that, and that's allowing that some might have been at debates or putting their children to bed or various different things, but most of us were always on it. And that was the time that we were spending writing up our policies, figuring out where we were going as a party, figuring out how we find out what the voice of people were. So, and most of those were only ever supposed to be 2 hours long and generally went for at least 4 hours. So, you know, on that, I would be saying probably, you know, at least 10 hours a week via a Zoom.
And so that's Zoom, right? And then all the other commitments as well. So tell me, where in Billy's schedule does he have time for all the affairs that he's been having all up and down New Zealand? Well, that's what people are saying. He's been having affairs up and down New Zealand. So when does he have the time for those? And
look, I can't answer that, but I can answer for the time he's been here in my electorate. I've known where he is and what he's doing, and he's not had a spare minute anywhere. He makes the most of every moment of his day. Now, obviously, I haven't travelled with him. I can't answer that. But the man that I've seen in that time, he's constantly talking about how much he loves his wife and he can't wait to get back and see his beautiful children. And the hardest thing for him is being away from his family. I am in a relationship with myself, with my husband. I have complete and utter trust in my husband the same as me. It wouldn't even cross my mind, because you know, to have an affair, because when you've got someone that you know is the perfect person for you, that doesn't mean it's always easy. Don't get me wrong, it's not always easy. Relationships aren't. But when you know that you're with the person that actually helps you to be the best person you can be, I don't feel a need to look elsewhere. I certainly don't sense from Billy a need for him to want to look elsewhere. I couldn't imagine him having the time or the energy, quite frankly. But, you know, I can't answer that. I've not been with him 24/7 for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
But when he's been here in this electorate, well, he hasn't had time. He hasn't had time.
All right, so really you can't completely cover his whole back, but you're just guessing that he just does not have the time. And do you know, just in my humble small life of running these interviews just once every few days, I'm like, I feel stressed out just trying to get the information together for one single interview. I'm like, you know, and same with me, I just couldn't think of anything else aside from what I'm trying to focus on. And I'm like, how, and so before I even asked you that, I thought to myself, how the heck has this guy managed all these affairs up and down New Zealand? I mean, he must be good, really good.
I mean, even my husband says the same thing. You know, if anything, I'm having an affair with all the research, because I just have this need to understand things. And I get really tunnel vision. It's like, no, honey, I can't go to bed. I've got to look up who this other professor is, and I need to find out this about that. And my poor husband's like, oh, I've lost my wife to the computer, and it's not even anything shady on the computer. It's the fact that I'm tunnel vision trying to piece information together. And yeah, I would absolutely say he is just on a mission, and it's a mission he doesn't want to be on. But a bit like myself, he can't actually live the rest of his life knowing he didn't try. And he's giving it everything. So yeah, I would find that surprising. You know, if anyone had those stories, you know, open to hearing them, because look, we're all human. And
that's the thing.
He wouldn't be the first person in the world that kind of thing had happened for, but I wouldn't say he's got the time at the moment.
And that's the thing that I'm wondering. I mean, because it's really, really easy for a journalist, especially so I looked at the Stuff website, and they're not allowed on the group, because back in the beginning they would be messaging our members trying to get stories, because the group's pretty interesting, there's lots of stories all the time, so their lazy journalists would just come on there and try and pluck people off for their stories. So we started going, shoo, you're not allowed, you're not welcome here. And whenever we would spot a journalist, we'd just give them the flick because they're annoying. And same with some of the radio hosts. Even a guy a local tried to join the page, because he was like, oh, my wife said the stories are really good on here, and so they come there for stories. So speaking of stories, I'd gone on to some of those websites to look, and you couldn't comment anymore. There's no comments, which means you can't actually have a conversation or say, oh, really, did he really do that? But what about this or this? So it's really the journalist writes something or says something, then they put it into a forum where the whole of New Zealand's going to read it, and then that's it. That's where the conversation stops. So that to me would be classed more as propaganda. And so this is a question from the ladies in the group. I put this up this afternoon, and I had a few people ask, with this piece that came out yesterday, so this is 5 days out from the election, right? With this piece that's just come out, just less than a week before an election, really well put together as far as I can see. They've obviously got lots and lots of information, which means they've been putting the story together for a long time. You know, they've been actually putting the pieces of this picture together to display, you know, this political party in this light, and they must have had this agenda from going way back, because when I write a piece of writing, sometimes it can take me a day and sometimes it can take me a week, and that's for a piece that long. So for me, I'm thinking, holy moly, they spent a long time putting this together, so it's been going on for ages. So two things. Is this just a smear campaign? Because, I mean, this close to an election when nobody can actually reply on any comments, when all you're doing is putting the piece of information out in front of all of the masses of people, nobody can respond, they can only talk amongst themselves and then come to their own conclusions. Doesn't that make this a smear campaign rather than a legitimate piece of journalism?
Oh, look, I don't even know what the definition of a smear campaign is. I haven't bothered to look that one up. What I can say is actually Radio New Zealand did quite an interesting interview on that today. And what they're saying is, you know, if we're polling at less than 1%, did it really warrant the hundreds of thousands of dollars that were spent on that documentary if we're polling at less than 1%? And I agree with that. It is quite interesting. So we've had under the Official Information Act information about the funding that went into that documentary. It's quite interesting. It was actually allocated in July. Now, back in July at the time, we weren't even a registered party at that stage. So they obviously knew in July that that we were going to be a threat. And I'm going, well, if we're a party that hasn't even been formed yet, how do you know you want to spend hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars disproving us when, you know, really the only thing for me can be they obviously knew then that we were speaking the truth and they wanted to shut it down. Because that's a hang of a lot of money of taxpayer dollar to spend for someone that wasn't even going to be in the election at that point.
Sorry, what taxpayer money? Where did it come from? Where did the funding come from for that documentary?
So that's come from, and I haven't got the exact pieces of paper in front of me right now, but it's come from New Zealand On Air. It's come from, directly from New Zealand government has paid for it.
New Zealand government in July has funded a documentary, which I myself as a writer and somebody who I think I've got a journalistic curiosity anyway, no degree, obviously, you know, that they've spent a long time putting this together. They've had somebody fund it from way back then. To me, this smells more fishy than the...
Oh, you be careful, you'll get called a conspiracy theorist soon if you say things like that. But yeah, it doesn't add up. And again, I don't believe that we're in the 1%. I've spent a fair bit of time standing on the side of the road holding up an Advanced New Zealand billboard. And for me, all you have to do is hear the amount of people that are tooting their horn and calling out the window that they're voting for us. And
might have been tooting at you.
You just, well, you know, maybe. I'll take that as a compliment. But you know, it's certainly more than 1% of the cars that drive by. So I don't know that I think too much of that. But realistically, when we look back to the polling companies in New Zealand anyway, they're actually not New Zealand companies. They're overseas owned companies. And then I would go, well, if it's actually international companies that are doing the polling for the New Zealand election, doesn't that in itself, isn't that international interference with our election? That's interesting in itself. And you know, if anyone wants to know about this stuff, I'm more than happy for them to get hold of me. My name is Kathryn Flay. It's spelt with a K, Kathryn. You can look me up on Facebook, send me an email. I'm more than happy to send all of this information out. It's easy to find, but we're down to 4 days. And if you haven't got too much of an idea of where to start looking, more than happy to point you in the direction. I'm not going to do people's homework for them, because I believe the best way to understand something is actually to find out for yourself.
So we've got 4 days, which is why I'm asking as many people to talk to us as possible in video.
When I looked at it, and really, I haven't seen the whole documentary. What I found a little bit offensive for me is just this comment of people blindly following Billy. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, that's not how it started for me. And I don't think I've blindly followed at all. In fact, I think of all our candidates, we're actually an incredible bunch of people. We all know how to find things out for ourselves and investigate things for ourselves. And I wouldn't say there's a single one of us blindly following. Now, when I put my hand up to be a candidate here, I got a group of people saying, we want to come on board and support you. And that was absolutely fantastic. So I didn't know any of those people. And, you know, what I've discovered, we have got such an amazing bunch of people. We've got journalists, we've got IT specialists, we've got event coordinators, we've got medical people, we've got leaders in various other forms. We've got so many people that have come on board. We've got health specialists, we've got allied health specialists, and they've all come on board, and they've come with the research they've done themselves. And so, you know, it hasn't been just what I've learned. I have learned so much from the people in the community here where I live. And if anything, that's been a little group of us working together, far more so than it's been anybody following Billy. It's just Billy's the first one that's actually publicly said it.
So that's interesting.
I feel like they're trying to make me feel like I'm a little bit dumb and I'm a little bit stupid and I wouldn't know how to work things out for myself. Well, actually I do. I haven't had the career that I've had by being a little bit naive and dumb. I haven't. You know, realistically, I'm actually an intelligent person, and I think that people like the makers of that documentary, you know, they should answer to the fact that they're basically saying New Zealanders are a dumb bunch of people that don't know how to work things out for themselves. I disagree. I think we're an amazing bunch of people. And yes, the fact that we have no right of response to it, yeah, that's a little bit rude just before an election. But hey, we're used to it. We know we've been shut down off Facebook. Our pages have been, everything's been disappearing off them. We can't get our live videos to go out. We can't get any reach on our posts these days. And for me, I was new to using Facebook. So after learning how to use it and getting used to the fact that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people responded to what I said, and now all of a sudden I might get 7 people respond, I think, that's a bit strange. You know, I think there's a lot of things happening to try and shut us down. Up and down the countryside, there've been a lot of candidates that have actually been refused entry to candidate debates, even though they're candidates standing in the election. And it's only advanced New Zealand candidates I've heard that for. I'm blessed here in this area. We've got an absolutely wonderful community, and I think that our community is pretty open-minded, and we do, you know, we do understand this idea of democracy and debating ideas and talking about what's the best, and I'm pretty lucky in this community, but I certainly hear stories from other candidates where, you know, newspapers have refused to publish things for them.
So that's literally the exact reason why I ran this political series, was because the minority parties were being squashed out. Tomorrow night I'm interviewing Social Credit Party, and then I'm going to talk to Daisy, the Chinese lady, talking about the communist stuff. But, you know, I wanted to be really balanced in this series, and I have been, but I have to say that this documentary that just got put out, because I've already interviewed Billy, it made me really curious, because I thought I've been really balanced about all of these parties, and I feel like I've given even coverage, but this person gets attacked, and I don't watch TV, and so I only see what I see here, and I just see no end of attack on this person. So in my lifetime, I've come to realize that usually when somebody's getting attacked that much, they're either absolutely are rubbish, or why are they getting attacked? What are people trying to stop? Like, what are they trying to silence? So I've come at it from the perspective of, what could it be? Is it because he is utter rubbish? Like, is Billy TK as rubbish as these journalists are saying that he is? Or are they worried about something? Are they scared of something? I don't know. I still don't know. I'm still just asking the questions.
I would say from my perspective, they're absolutely scared because they know we're telling the truth. And that's what I see time and time again. Just coming back to the interviewing of the minor parties, I have to say well done, because a lot of, the minor parties, they're saying some really good stuff. And there's some real decent common sense coming through in a lot of the parties, and that's something I'm really about. Let's have some common sense. Let's let the people in a local community actually decide what should be done in that community.
Yes,
I went to a debate. It wasn't in my electorate area. It was up in Kaipara ki Maharangi, and there was a candidate for social credit there. And I'll tell you what, that guy warmed my heart and soul. He was 22 years old, and I went, yes, if we've got people that are as onto it as what you are, there is hope for our country. He was 22 years old. I'm sorry, but like, that's kind of the age of my kids, but I just thought, man, he's done his homework. He knows what he's talking about. He was absolutely respectful, probably the most respectful person that was there. And for me, respect is a big thing. A big thing about being a leader is actually listening first, finding out what people are saying. He just presented himself so well. Yes, you could see he was a bit nervous, but hey, he's 22 years old. I tell you what, if I lived in that electorate, I'd be voting for him.
And I keep saying it would be so good if politics was like Mr. Potato Head, and you could just pick the head for that and the noun for that and the eyeball for that, and just put together a government out of like potato head pieces, and that would suit me perfectly fine. But because we have to go and darn well choose, that's why I've been trying to just give everybody an even sort of air time so that we can ask the questions. But I just while we're finishing up, I just want to ask, so let's just fire out some of these questions really quickly. So Billy has been accused of ripping off his musician team members. I have actually heard a response to that from him before, but that was part of the interview, like part of what I would call, what I would personally call a smear campaign. He has been accused of infidelities and adultery. He has been accused of, what else has he been accused of? Oh, okay, I'm losing track, because he's just been accused of so many things. And can one person really be, I understand because it's quite a new party, and so because he's new, whereas other politicians, maybe you'd pull a little bit out on Winston one year and pull another bit out another year and a bit more and a bit more, but because Billy's new and he's sort of risen up quite quickly, do you think that they've just gone, right, let's go and find what we can find about him? And let's face it, he was a musician, and he can't have been not a naughty one, because he would have, at some stage during his life when he wasn't married, he would have had to have been a naughty musician. He's a boy.
So are most people in their life, aren't they?
Yeah, well, exactly. But, do you feel like they have pulled things, they call them skeletons in the closet, but are they really skeletons when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20?
There is for me, there's been nothing that Billy's not answered. Honestly, he's open. He says ask him anything, he'll answer it. He's only human. I don't think he's tried to hide anything, so I don't think they've pulled any skeletons out of the closet. It's nothing he hasn't already said. Yeah. He certainly never said he's a prophet. He certainly never wanted to be in that position. So I think that's purely them putting words in his mouth that he's certainly never said.
Yeah. That is so weird.
I have actually utmost respect for him. I know how much I've been attacked, and it's hard because, yes, I have friends, family, colleagues who don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. But it does attack personally, because I'm still a person at the end of the day. I can't imagine how much more he's had of it. But I think realistically, there's a couple of things that we come out really strongly against. And one of those being that we're saying, hey, open up the borders. Let's take a real good look at what the rest of the world is actually saying about this virus and what lockdowns do. And let's welcome some of those expert opinions, because we've got a very narrow range of people that we're listening to. in terms of our Ministry of Health, and they're actually not particularly well respected people that we're listening to. So let's just broaden that net a wee bit. Let's open up our country. We don't want any more poverty. We don't want the economic disaster that we're heading for. Let's actually start doing something about it. And that's something that no other party is saying. So, you know, great reason to be a target because we're saying something different. But we're actually saying something that's in line with what the rest of the world is saying and what the rest of the world is doing. And the other thing that's quite strong for us is that we really believe that our current government, as well as decades of governments prior to this, have been signing New Zealand up to agreements and deals that they haven't been particularly transparent about. And we're just saying, hey, we're the people, we want to know what you're signing us up to. And you know, fundamentally, I don't have any Māori in me, but I have done years worth of Māori history studies. We've got two beautiful documents in New Zealand. One is called He Whakaputanga. The other is Te Tiritio Waitangi. So they're affectionately known in English as New Zealand's Declaration of Independence and the Treaty of Waitangi. Now, those were agreements that were signed between the people of New Zealand, be it the Māori chiefs at the time. Their intention was that the people would be one people of New Zealand as a free people, signing a treaty with the Crown, that the Crown would protect us to be a free and sovereign people of New Zealand. And for me, there's a lot of danger when we start to say, let's maybe just kind of get some of those documents out of our history and not pay too much attention to them. And I think that, you know, as a party, we're actually saying, let's interpret them in the way that they were meant at the time. There was no separatism with those documents. The Māori chiefs were saying, come, live in our country, be here, let's live as one people, but let's make sure we're going to be a sovereign people and that we've got the right to be sovereign in our own country. And then yet we've got decisions that are being made on our behalf. I mean, another one that I find absolutely massive is that our New Zealand National Library has decided to cull 600,000 books within New Zealand. So they're no longer within libraries. You can no longer buy them within New Zealand. And a lot of those books are actually talking about history in New Zealand. They're books that talk about traveling and exploring the world or broadening your mind. And I'm going, you know, they presented it very beautifully in the sense that they wanted to make room for more Māori and Pacific literature. But did we have to get rid of 600,000 books? And some of them are actually just beautiful stories. I remember as a kid, do we have to get rid of those in order to make room for more? Why can't we just have everything
put together in one big happy family?
Absolutely. And there is no such thing as one happy family, because every family on this planet knows that you have those times. As I said, I've got 4 sons. It's not always peaceful and smooth sailing, but you know, the beauty of having difference of opinion is it makes life an interesting place. I worked with an incredibly brilliant professor for part of my career, Professor John Weary. He was highly renowned through New Zealand, and he was in his 70s at the time I worked with him. Now, he was fit as anything. He was healthy. He was so energetic. He could outthink me, outbeat me in everything under the sun. I said to him at one point, how can you do this at your age? How are you so sharp? How are you so quick? And he told me his secret was that he read one chapter from 3 different books every night before he went to bed, and that was his secret. He said it just keeps expanding the mind. You think different perspectives. You don't get set in your ways. And then I'm going, that was brilliant, and that's been brilliant advice for me. And here we are as New Zealand now getting rid of 600,000 books out of our National Library. Aren't we supposed to be trying to sharpen our minds and be more intelligent? I've got off track again. I'm good at doing that.
How am I going to pull this one, rein this one back in?
Yeah, no, look. For me, I'm not following a cult leader like they might be saying. I'm not following a messiah. I'm actually using my own God-given brain and my own intelligence is telling me that what he's saying is right, because things don't add up. So yeah, I would say it's a smear campaign, but I don't actually know what the definition of smear campaign is, but it certainly sounds like mudslinging to me.
Pretty much. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. I'm losing my concentration now. I'm definitely tired. This end of the day is no good for me for interviews, but thanks so much for coming along. And you know, if we've got anything else that we can link or anything like that to back up this information, then that would be really cool. Otherwise, thanks so much for your as much clarification as you could give us, and being that you don't actually travel with him side by side everywhere through New Zealand, so you can't really follow him like that. But you know, yeah, good just to have somebody who's got a little bit more of the inside information. And you know, and again, like I said, I was doing these interviews because I really don't feel like journalism in New Zealand is very balanced, and just wanted to showcase some of the minorities. So hopefully we've maybe aired this out a little bit tonight. I'm not sure. Still not sure where I sit on all of this, but I'm going to dig even deeper and get some, you know, get some more information.
You can do.
Yeah.
And if I get the opportunity to come back on and put some comments on, I would just recommend people to have a look up what the Great Barrington Declaration is. Have a look up the German investigative Corona Investigation Committee. Have a look them up. Have a look at what's happening with protests around the world, and don't necessarily rely on mainstream media and the information we're giving, because you know, just go and do your homework. We've only got 4 days left. Go and do your homework, get out there and vote, make your vote count. If you don't know who to vote for, do some research. And thank you, Natalia, for having me. It's been really lovely.
No problem whatsoever. Talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Whoa.
You can relax now. Shall we go and get a wine?
I know, that's what I feel like. Oh God. Oh my gosh. I started that one off feeling tired, so hopefully
You didn't look tired.
Oh good. Hopefully I stayed hopefully I said everything I needed to say, because that was my main thing. I was thinking, oh no, I'm going to forget stuff.
I was waiting for you to be nasty. I didn't get any of that.
Oh, I had to say that a little bit at the end though, because I have to, you know, be impartial. I'm still not sure where I stand on all of this, but I'll just mull it over and oh, thank you.
What a funny world we live in, eh? Every seed you plant.
Yeah. That's what I'm praying. I don't know what people will get out of it. I shut down the Facebook because I couldn't concentrate. They kept pinging me. So I haven't seen who's watched or anything. So I'll go back and have a look at that now. But you know,
me too.
The numbers usually build up over the week. So we'll just see what happens, and then I'll just go save this to Zoom and YouTube and all of that.
Yay. Thank you.
Cool. All right.
A wonderful evening, and let's catch up sometime soon. I'm in theory heading to Kaitaia early tomorrow morning. I'm just kind of going, will I really?
Well, what have you got to go? Is that for the Marae thing?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I have to start doing my washing if I'm going, so I'm kind of going,
nah, another day.
Wine.
If it was based on whether my washing was done, I wouldn't be going.
That's where I stand at the moment. Come on, no clean socks. I can't sleep in a room full of people if I've got no clean socks.
Oh, that's so true. Little Scotty feet. Okay, I'm going to bed. I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.
See ya.
Bye.